it's like when I was in training and I was a trainer for sales and sales management, I talk about the tapes in the head. What does your brain tell you? When you were little, your parents said, don't talk about money. It's not polite. Money doesn't grow on trees. Every penny saved is a penny earned, that kind of thing. And depending on that tape can impact you. And now I'm in finance, right? So how do I ask people about money if I'm not supposed to talk about it? Right? Don't talk to strangers. If I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, how am I supposed to network?
Right.
All these tapes that are in such a young, impressionable mind, you don't know how much they're absorbed into the soul of the person. The foundation that you gave us, or the foundation that the camp gave us, the experience of being independent on our own, taking risks and doing those things rewired some of those tapes.
Welcome to the Camp Fifi Uncensored podcast, episode 112, part 1, with our guest, Jill Barnett Kirshenbaum, who is just a tiny package filled with a powerful message. She's in the financial world and leading as a woman in ways that are helping corporations as well as Israeli cancer research. And her conversation with me is so touching because we go all the way back to when she was 7 and I was 18. So grab that coffee and grab that cannoli because here we go.
Welcome, Jill, to the Camp Fifi Uncensored podcast. This is crazy. We're having technical funny moments. And literally, I hope right now we are fixed. I can see we're recording. I never had to record a podcast on my phone, but whomever is saying, no, you're gonna bob and weave.
This is part of your journey, right? You can handle anything.
Most apropos of the importance of being able to bob and weave in the moment.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I think it's a brilliant presentation to open our conversation.
Absolutely.
Right? So yep. Jill, you and I reconnected, thank God, through social media.
Right.
And I think that I have said multiple times over this last year the real importance of the value of the positive outcome of what social media can provide us as a community, individually. Yeah, there's a lot of other things that I know that people are faced with, whether it's with raising kids or dealing with just, the like squirrel mentality or just,
everything.
But for us, the positive has been our ability to reconnect over these years. And I really feel like, and you please correct me, but I know that last year when I went public from my hospital bed was kind of like when the floodgates opened up and you and I really directly had an impactful connection, which for those of you that don't know the backstory, I've just gone and survived ovarian cancer and I'm in remission and really lucky to be here. And Jill comes along, who we have history with because of summer camp and all these people that we know and grew up with. And we really, we didn't grow up in horse and buggy, but we grew up.
But you were my counselor and I was your camper and you were my favorite.
And I know it's just amazing how these full circle moments, it could tear me up. Today's been a day of like emotions, which is good. I always believe that crime's a good thing. As long as people don't go, oh no, there she goes again. I don't think that's who I personally am, but I do sit in the people need to feel their emotions and feel that they can be vulnerable. And I think it goes back to that post that I made, that my willingness and learning through social media and studying with people, especially ironically in the financial world over these last 3 years, that it's selfish to keep information to yourself. Now, granted, I'm sure they're not giving business secrets away on a certain level, but yet on another level, the people I've seen who have been most successful have really pulled back their own curtains to say, hey, come with us, don't do it alone, all the things. And so my takeaway was, when I did that post, scary as all get out, to make that public announcement, but it was really for a bigger reason, which was to wake people up and to say, if this can happen to me, this can happen to anybody, then I don't want it to. So please listen. And then you come along like this angel, and so, just kind of, do your own sailing in and start to like put fairy dust into my world, which helped me, even though I had already, been in action mode for months and had surgery at this point. But just like, how can I serve you? How can I bring value? And I think to that point, like, one of my takeaways of this year amongst my life, and I'm sure you, as my camper, would be able to give a really totally different perspective on this, but the value of giving, the value of raising up, the value of support and love, and not what can I get out of it, but what can I give to make things better for somebody else. And that's what you did for me last December, January, February, March, April.
Well, how could I not? I mean, honestly, maybe I was born with a big empathy gene, and a supportive gene, or maybe it's just because I've recognized in my life it's been a journey, and, I'm writing a book about it, and it's been crazy. And, but it's also because I love you. And I've always had a part of me that really was, you were there when I was 7 years old until you were my counselor. And then I continued on at camp until I was 14. I absolutely loved seeing you. And it was just, you were one of my, I could say this honestly, you're probably what you are like the one that I remember the most, next to Georgie, who runs the camp, right? You had that part of me where I felt secure. You put your arms around me and everybody in our cabin. And as a counselor, that's what you need. You're away from home. It can be scary and intimidating as a kid, but for whatever reason, you made it a level where we looked forward to being there for 8 weeks in the summer. And at that time, it wasn't the price that it is now, granted, but at that time, you gave me the security that I needed, for the summer. And for me to recognize at the time that you needed help, that you needed support, even though you seemed strong in your messaging, and man, were you strong. When you went out there, the guts, the gumption, the way that you did it, it was, listen, I was honored to be able to see it, to be able to hear you, and to recognize that, because I'm on a cancer research board, the struggle that you were facing. But if anybody was determined to kill it, to knock it out of the park, and to be stronger for it, that's you, baby. That's you. And no, I am so lucky to be able to call you my friend after, I don't want to say the age, but we're much older, and I got a 20-year-old now and a 17-year-old now, and when I was 7 years old, I didn't imagine I'd be in this spot right now talking to you. So this is a journey, and this is a full circle moment, and it's not even complete.
I feel like in its own way, it's just like getting started. It's ironic to the book, as I've been thinking and being told, write the book, write the books, write the books. This is a new chapter. This is a defining moment also. And it's so, I love, thank you for sharing all of that perspective, because it is your story, your perspective from your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
That never tell. I can only tell you mine. Ironically, your kids are the age that I was, that you knew and met, and we fell in love with each other and did what we did. And you said something so key, as many things are already like, it's like a bowl full of goodness that's already been like put out there. You said something as a child perspective of going to an 8-week girls camp. Now, granted, for most, they might be like, 8-week girl camp, what? Who does that? Or who could afford that? Or who has that opportunity? Or I never heard of that. Or all the things that, or maybe many have. Whomever you are out there, what I want to speak on regarding this kind of opportunity that women like us have had the opportunity as children, and certainly in my case, then returning as a counselor, because my parents couldn't continue to afford to send my sister and I there after a couple of years, because they got hit hard by the recession during that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
I made this secret promise to myself. I'll go back when they can pay me to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Promise to self. 6 years later, when the American Camp Association says you either have to have 1 year of college or be 18 to be a counselor, I had to put in a year of college because I was a September baby.
Mm-hmm.
It's super cool and interesting, and I'm really touched that the two people that resonate with you from camp is Georgie and myself, because the impact of that statement alone is so touching and huge to me. And the reason why is because Georgie, for me, as an 11-year-old girl, was everything. She was the epitome of the things that I loved: art, science. I already knew that. Nature, she was a quiet loner, but she was an observer, but yet she was obviously very integrated, but in her own signature way.
Uh-huh.
It was because of she and Jeff that I got to come back as a counselor and fulfill my dream. And I didn't know what that dream looked like. I didn't know the next 5 years were going to be this masterful, pure joy of connecting with so many incredible individuals like yourself, from the time, like you said, we're 7 to, in your case, would have been about 12 by the time 12 going on 13, give or take. When I left Nicolay, there was also a time that I didn't know was going to be preemptive of laying the land for me to really step into being a mom, that I never got to realize in my birthing children. So super, super cool, because, and I know that, maybe your mom or your dad wouldn't be like, oh, that's super, super cool. But my point is that I didn't know what I didn't know, that I get to see now.
Yeah.
The seeds that were planted unconsciously with just pure heart. That was the intention. And the give, going back to the value of giving versus what can I get kind of thing. And, the groundwork that period of time laid, which is what inspired also this gathering around the campfire, because I think it's the most purely authentic place where people can find themselves, in that space of nature meets removal of all the things you're used to, and learning truly, as the motto for our camp is, learning to live together. I mean, how, as little kids, we didn't even understand the impact. We knew, but we didn't know how that ripple effect would go out into the world and how we would apply it to all aspects of our life, right?
Well, from your perspective, you saw all these kids coming, being excited to be there. From my perspective, it was a getaway for me. I had my parents divorced when I was 3, and it was Kramer versus Kramer years. I had a lot of turmoil as a kid. And my father was the one who said, if we have an opportunity to let you be a kid, to be with people who can hug you and give you what you need, it's going to be over the summer where you can get away. And I mean, they'd come up for parents' weekend, you know, or my dad would, or my mom would. They would rotate, right? 7 years there. I think it was just,
Yeah.
but my year, I would count down the days to go to camp. There were 7 Jills in my cabin my first year. I think we were at Fur. Were we Fur or Little Fawn? I think it was Fur.
That's
And
that
yeah,
had to have been had you.
yeah. And my first day, I was like, how are all these Jills? We all have to have nicknames. And that's when I got JB. And my nickname still today, my dad still calls me JB. I have friends from camp that I see once in a while. They call me JB. I have people yelling down the street, JB, who I know. It is the funniest, you know, it's just the impact for
Yeah.
life, you know, but the safety. And like I said, the big hug that, you know, I call people, you know, in my life that, you know, if I had a problem with something, I would find a gap filler, you know, and, you know, when I had challenges with my mother, my friends' mothers became my gap fillers, you know, and when I had challenges in life and family when I was little, camp became my big gap filler. And I think that's an important, you know, distinction because people can either choose to run away from it and go down into a spiral of depression and, you know, it just gets crazy, especially with a crazy life. Or you can find those things that can help to heal that and go with it. And it's just, I'm such a, I mean, I'm a go with the flow kind of person, you know, in general, but I'm always open to having conversations with people, you know, and I love that. Right. And where I can meet somebody new and listen to their story. I mean, I'll go to a person who has tattoos all over them and people will be, you know, ooh and ah, and whatever they might say, but I'll say, hey, can you explain what that one is? I find that people get tattoos for a reason, right? Tell me the story behind that. And I get the most amazing stories,
Yeah.
you know,
Because,
people eagerly wanting to share.
yeah, because people are like, oh my God, you see me, you want to hear me, see I'm, you know, present. It's a powerful, that in of itself. You don't even have to say that. You are already saying it in your actions. And it's an interesting thing because that is a big thing that leads me to lots of things. I think that that's why camp environment, for the most part, depending upon the individual, of course, is a successful environment to develop oneself, whether you're conscious or not that that's going to occur. And there's so many things you said, Jill, about your whys, your upbringing, your experience, your environment, what camp meant to you. Because I knew upon my return at 18, you know, after my freshman year of college, I knew strangely that I had already seen, this is the funny thing, I had already seen so much life that there wasn't anything any one of you couldn't come up to me and go, since you last saw me, my parents divorced, I've been told I'm diabetic, or I, you know, have put on weight, or I was bullied, or I am homesick, or I want to water ski, but I'm too scared to, or yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it all. I didn't ask to get it all, but I get it. And I think that that was why I was so super, super sensitive to each and every one of you individually. Why? Because I wanted you all to be fearlessly unstoppable. I wanted you all to be so loved and confident that there was nothing in your way. And anytime, if at any time when it did come up, it'd be like, yeah, I get it. So let's keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I was laying those like things that people go to pay lots of money for people to coach them today.
Yeah.
In the
You taught us to be curious. You taught us to be an explorer. You taught us to go out and be independent, to be a thinker, right? you gave us so much that even my kids, when they got to be camp age and I sent them to camp, I think doing that as a parent gets you ready for when they leave the nest to go to college, right? They've already been on their own. You know, they've proven the concept of being independent at a young age. Surely they can do it, hopefully, anyway, in their college years. And it just, you did that for us, right? That curiosity, though, that, you know, that kind of, let's go see what's around the corner. Let's go look in the woods. Let's go water ski and see if you can do this thing. The challenge that you gave us that we would meet, you know, or we'd fail and fail really well and then learn from it, which is all about risk taking in life. So I think camp is so valuable, whether it's 4 weeks or 8 weeks,
We're
on so
taking,
many different levels, you
yeah,
know, overall, for both
I,
parent and child and counselor and director and anybody else that is so lucky. And yeah, there's a cost, you know, to it, but there's a benefit that far outweighs, I think, the cost in some ways.
well, I think too, like, I know, and it's interesting how this conversation is reminding me of, I didn't know what I was doing. So technically I was doing it messy. I was just showing up, doing it the best I knew how. Yes, I was certified and things like I had a water safety instructor certification so I could teach any form of water, life saving and swimming. I was certified with American Water Ski Association to be a boat driver and a teacher. I was, USTA certified. I'd run indoor tennis clubs. There were things I could do. And I had this life experience of being a kid as a camper. And it's interesting because I probably suffered from homesickness more than anybody I knew as a little girl. Seriously. And
Mm-hmm.
find me like in the canteen nurturing myself. Like that 4 week camp I went to before Nicolay, basically you could be in the canteen all day long if you wanted. And I might have been, or damn near close. Because my addiction or my nurturing the little girl that couldn't help her parents at 3 years old was climbing up into the cupboards in the middle of the night because I couldn't save them. So this was my unconscious conscious way of me taking care of little Felicia. Little did I know that how those kind of childhood traumas, like yourself, my parents didn't get divorced at 3, but they were in and out of relationship with one another, breaking up, getting together, splitting up, getting together. It was a combination of lots of things, mixed religions, mixed cultures,
Yeah.
uh, being discriminated in many environments, though you didn't, nobody would think, that was happening, but it was not in a like, oh, but it was real in the 60s. Jews and Sicilians weren't allowed behind country club gates, no
Well,
matter what you accomplished. And that's here nor there. I don't even need to go down that. But the camp experience or environments like it, where you get to be, whether it's college or camp or the work environment or retreats, or wherever you put yourself in environments on a daily basis, a weekly, a monthly, or once a year, when you are in environments with people that are not your bloodline. Now imagine if everybody in their own bloodline resonates with one another. So now you're going to take people outside of their bloodline and teach them how to share, negotiate, live, honor, respect, bring value, love on, like, not bully. It's like a one pot meal, no pun intended, with around a campfire, right? My husband used to give me so much shit for my one pot meals, and I was like, I could take care of a lot of people with this. So just either get on board or not.
right.
So it's either an egg in a hole or one pot meal, and I can deliver.
Egg in the hole.
I served that last night, by the way. So I'm present, and he loves them. So
My son just had one about a month ago and never had one before. So I totally remember that. I mean, look, I grew up on Stouffer's and fried bologna because we were emptying, like we were latchkey kids growing up. I
yes,
mean,
yeah,
total latchkey kids.
8 years old, became a latchkey kid. My mom was so upset she had to go back to work, even though she was prepared, even though she was educated and prepared and capable.
Mhm.
She still was like, that wasn't our deal.
Right.
So, there were just, those were a lot of what was in that one pot meal, of a lot of like ups and downs and ups and downs. And so it's really interesting that you share this with me, Jill, because in this last year, I knew none of this. None of this. That's what's why I love this format so much.
Yeah.
Because it brings to the table so much more. And I think it's a combination of meet people where they are. I think it's a combination of we don't know how we can possibly affect one another by just showing up and being kind and compassionate and empathetic. I think we don't know each other's stories, so therefore you never know how your story and somebody else's is actually more the same than not. Let's face it, we all come in the same, we all go out the same. It doesn't matter our accomplishments, it doesn't matter our economics, none of it matters. We don't see around the world what we see currently and in the past and what may be in the future. How do you not see that is another question of questions.
Yeah.
And I just, for me personally, love that you remind me of all the reasons why I do keep getting up in my personal situation, why I encourage other people to keep getting up, because the discovery, the curiosity, and the ability is way more powerful than not. And to your point, and it's so fascinating because, as I said, when I became a counselor for 5 years between the age of 18 and 23, I did not know that my conscious unconsciousness was I'm creating a family environment here. Why? Because though I love my very first counselor, Nicolay, who still to this day is my favorite, besides Georgie and a Bess Maxwell, who may have been gone by the time you were there. I don't remember. I think she was.
Yeah, I don't remember Bess.
So these were women who made a huge impact on me. But I haven't seen them outside of social media since. And so the years and years have passed. But for me, because of the family environment and the instability, it was my purpose to make each of my cabins be a family, show up as a family. We were not just 8 campers or 10 campers or 12 campers in bunks, and you were my bunkmate and I was your counselor. No, morning, noon, and night, we showed up collectively, doing our thing, from making ourselves winners of the cabin cleaning to the camping and tripping experiences we had that were amazing. Yeah. And I knew, I don't even know how I made this decision, but I knew as a child, I love nature, but I didn't love those experiences. And yet I knew it was in my blood to love it. So I wanted you guys to love it the way I knew that I love nature. And at that point, I had actually already done expeditions in the Appalachians at 15. So in between my time at Nicolay and coming back to Nicolay, I'd done those things independent of my family. So I knew the wanting to give. I knew, and I'd already been away at boarding school and I'd already started college. So I had definitely all that strange, interesting, by the time I was 18, life experience that I was pouring back into you guys, not having any idea that 40 years later, the impact.
Well, yeah. I mean, I got big into, my dad, I was lucky. My dad had a boat, at Montrose Harbor in Chicago. And I grew up sailing with my own little bucket that I designed because I'd constantly get sick, seasick. And when I learned how to get on a Hobie Cat, and I'll never forget, I was probably 8 years old when I wanted to try windsurfing. And I remember pulling that thing up and the wind was at my back and I was shaking with the determination and strength that I did not have to get this thing up while on dry land. When I finally got strong enough and I finally went out there, it was amazing. And that was the whole thing with camp. It's like accomplishments, right? You keep trying and trying and trying. I was into horseback riding, and I got into the horseback riding show team. And so we were going to different camps and we were showing, and I still have my ribbons. And the one time I'll never forget, I hadn't had enough water. I was totally dehydrated. I got on my horse, Charlie, who was the one that I always went out with. I was doing dressage. So we were going over the jumps, right? I was in a 3-point position, is when you're all tucked up and your butt's off the seat and they're jumping. Well, you squeeze with your legs to get them over. I had stomach cramps that were so bad that I sounded like a Russian dancer going after every jump, every jump. And it was loud because when a horseback rider is going, you can hear a pin drop because you can't have that loud noise in the background, disturbs the horse. So I literally finished where none of the other horses did. They got spooked or shied away from one, if not two, of the jumps. I made it through, rolled off the horse, laid on a bench with my team, and ended up having to stand up somehow, being brought out by 3 people to stand with my, counterparts, and I won. So they lifted me into the van, laid me down on the bench, no seatbelt laws at that time. So I remember going back and going to the infirmary and, just getting all that water, but it was unbelievable. But the determination, right? It through life.
Really, those were key elements, because what I say, and the reason why I think camp is such an awake camp is so important for young kids, because your peers won't let you get away with shit.
Mm-mm.
You don't show up doing your part, they're going to call you out on it.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that today might be different for all sorts of reasons, but I feel that kids would relish unplugging more and being more connected in person, and felt like they were heard and seen the way we got to hear and see one another. I make the running joke that I've been aligned with certain people in Hollywood that it doesn't matter how long you've been with them, they may act like like they never saw you. And you've been with them for years. And I could remember like somebody's nail bed in the dining hall with their hands on the table, and I'd be like, oh my God, of course it's Jill's nail bed. Like, what? Because we're so deeply integrated with one another. And I think that, again, one of the reasons why this was such an important platform for me to be a part of and wanted way back, like not a decade before podcasts took off, but a good half a dozen years or so, because I wanted to, I just think conversation is the key. I think key. I think it's energy. I think it's money. I think it's life stories. It's all the same. It just shows up in a different form. And it's all a big illusion, frankly. We're here for a split second and we're gone. So like, does this conversation matter? Well, it depends upon who's listening. And at the end of the day, maybe not. But to us in the moment, we're sharing the why we did make impacts, the why we are connected, the why, the compound effect of taking action or being present or saying yes or recognizing the determination an 8-year-old had to see something through that paid off and continues to pay off in the way you show up in your life today as a grown woman and as a mother, and who's had relationships in business and personally, and no matter what your childhood story and experience was, how none of that stopped you. Not that it would have, but to some it would. And it's like any life decision, and how we how we connected. Again, through this journey we were talking about at the beginning of the value. You just don't know how you are going to impact other people's lives.
Mm-mm.
You know, as to that post, you don't know. I did not know how many people I was going to impact. And knew that I was told to document my journey thanks to my trainer. That was not the first, but the first one I posted, really scared, as I've said, because it wasn't about me. It was about how can I help others through story. And I think that like camp is a perfect example of how we hold each other up. It's just an is. We celebrate each other. It's just an is. We move from one space to another together, collectively together, in gratitude together, and growing together. And some have strengths, others have that are strengths in other spots. And collectively, we still can honor each other. And I think that for anybody who has that good fortune, I mean, I remember when I heard that, I think it was probably a decade or so ago when I heard one of the studio heads at the time had a huge camp experience, like as a camper and a counselor. I was like, well, that to me makes perfect sense that you'd become a studio, because it's, to me, it's same but different dynamics, but the ability to sit and listen, to solve problems, to
Take risks. Yeah.
be correct. Yes, to collectively as a team versus singular minded leadership, winning,
Well,
goals.
all these things in our it's like when I was in training and I was a trainer for sales and sales management, I talk about the tapes in the head. What does your brain tell you? When you were little, your parents said, don't talk about money. It's not polite. Money doesn't grow on trees. Every penny saved is a penny earned, that kind of thing. And depending on that tape can impact you. And now I'm in finance, right? So how do I ask people about money if I'm not supposed to talk about it? Right? Don't talk to strangers. If I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, how am I supposed to network?
Right.
All these tapes that are in such a young, impressionable mind, you don't know how much they're absorbed into the soul of the person. The foundation that you gave us, or the foundation that the camp gave us, the experience of being independent on our own, taking risks and doing those things rewired some of those tapes. So that in life, I think, when you think about a child who's in high school, who has to go out on stage and speak, you can bring back the time. And also an understanding that the teachers who asked him to do this wouldn't have asked him to do it if he didn't feel like he could, or if they didn't feel like he could. And the confidence that you get from others, like counselors and supporters and people around you, if it's negative, it goes on one shoulder. It's like the devil on your shoulder. But you think of the one person that wants you to be able to do that thing or accomplish that thing. How much do they weigh compared to these flecks of people that you just don't even want to be with? This one shoulder, that confidence, it has to get stronger and stronger in your childhood, so that foundation can really help to lift you up when you're an adult. And it's really challenging. I had a therapist from the time I was 7 and until I was probably 25, because I needed somebody to talk to who could be on that shoulder.
Absolutely. Yeah, because if you don't have a neutral, healthy person, and you're lucky, because I've shared this also before, that my family was like, they were doing therapy in the 60s. It was okay, like going to the dentist. There was nothing negative about it. And I think mental health, just to that point, is something that we as a society have to recognize, that the mind, the brain, the heart, head, the mind heart connection, the body, soul, spirit connection really does need to be addressed through these journeys with healthy outlets, with healthy sources of individuals who are capable of seeing and hearing and are trained to be that support system.
Because
Healthy.
life can be messy and bumpy, and with a lot of things in life that make you you. But when you think about it, we're not all living these blessed lives, where everything's been perfect all our lives. It's rare. I don't think I met anybody who's had such a charmed life that they've never, ever had anything bad happen. So, with all the trauma in life, everybody says they have baggage. Mine is a Louis Vuitton. It sits in the corner. It's a hard case. I mean, it's a really pretty hard case. And on the inside is a hot mess. And I tell you, if I unpack those stories in there and put them on me, I would be a hot mess. And I tell people, I leave that there. I'm writing a book now, and I'm unpacking some of these stories. And they are, I let a friend of mine read a chapter who's a writer, and she was really emotional. So I it's like there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
But I can't wear it on me. And people should be conscious. You talk about conscious unconsciousness or being consciously unconscious. Well, I mean, I consciously separate. I have to. It's like a surgeon who is in, cancer and, the cancer ward, the oncologist who has to go and deliver the bad news. Well, that person you see on the weekend versus in an office sharing bad news, how do they separate?
Right.
I have a friend who's a surgeon who literally would change his hat, his surgery hat. He'd have one for the bad news. He'd go in, deliver, come out, change the hat, put on his happy hat, right? The one where he can go do rounds and talk to people. And then at the end of the day, he'd take a shower before anything else because he could wash it all off. But he intentionally did that, put it into practice, and eventually believed it.
Yeah.
Right?
So key.
It's a muscle. And somehow that muscle, the more you do it, it's like changing a habit.
Yeah.
It's a muscle memory. And to change it, you just have to keep repeating over and over again the exercise until you actually own it.
It's such a key life lesson that I know so many people speak on, but I think when people actually really take a look at oneself and their own life patterns, their own actions, their own intentions, that is exactly what it takes. It's not you wake up and one day everything's just figure outable, but things are figure outable. And like you said, a muscle needs to be trained. You don't show up as a world-class sprinter. You train for that. I can't, it's interesting. I did a post this morning that by the time this is dropped will be a few weeks, but I woke up this morning and I was touched emotionally by the fact that Hollywood had finally settled. It's
exciting news.
Release, while also a reflection of where one's going, the unknown, and the hopefulness and the belief that you can't have those things if you don't have those things and succeed through over as many years and a few decades if you're not stuck with those kind of belief systems, right?
No, but you drove during that time that they were on strike. You started repping a line. I ended up buying some, by the way, of athletic wear. Yeah. You pivoted to doing more of these, opportunities to talk to people. You took the bull by the horns and said, what can I do with this now, this empty space? And you gap filled.
Yes.
And I applaud you for that, because I know other people that went, oh, woe is me. What am I going to do? I'll get on my bike and, but it was, what What did they do? They started going on late night TV and talking about the book they wrote. If you were a writer, that was one thing. But if you were an actor and you wrote a book, now you can go on TV and at least have some FaceTime and not talk about the thing that you were working on before they went on strike. We were so entertained by all that,
Well,
and reruns and oh my God, the reruns and the reruns.
Well, and to your point also, it is interesting. I just had this conversation about, I'm not capable of sitting there staring at my navel. I may not feel like I'm moving forward, but I know that every step is a little bit of walking into the piece of clay that I've been sculpting and
Right.
go, the tush off here. It's called a living sculpture. That's how I look at life. Do I want to be further ahead? I'm really happy right in this moment, and it's interesting because one of my many takeaways is my mindset has always been the thing, and for all of us, it is the thing that determines our experience, our decisions, our taking action. Whether it's a cancer journey or being a child at a summer camp or pulling up that sail to learn how to wind sail, or how you step into finances and pave a path or make a decision to be a mom. And I think that people don't realize to a greater way, because they don't, like I said, they don't pause and they don't take the mindful approach to the why and how to stay present and how to stay in the now and how to embrace these moments to moments, no pun intended, and the importance of how as well taking action is the key to solving your problems and not sitting in your why me bullshit. Because it's super easy to do that, but what does that solve? And, it's interesting you mentioned the actors writing the books, for instance. I've always been a big believer of multiple streams of income. I found my yeses to be more powerful than my nos.
Yeah.
I found this to go back to curiosity and determination. I didn't know how these things were going to turn out, and they're still going and growing. And I just know what my character is, which is curious, always like to win. I'm not in competition with you. I'm in competition with me. You might help me strive for greater. I don't doubt that. And as I hope I do with you, but it's not a competition. And I think that you saw that as a kid, the way I provided environments where everybody had the value. It wasn't about, oh, everybody should win the blue ribbon. No, it wasn't that. There were different situations. Everybody earned what they deserved through their hard work and efforts. But I definitely felt like everybody should be included and felt valued. So I know that that's, always been my approach. And so I think going back to taking action on multiple streams of income and my mindset and what I have always tried to lean into is, I can look around and go, oh my God, I wish I had, or oh my God, I wish I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be in the moment. Like you're exactly supposed to be in the moment. And I have nothing to be ashamed of, or nor do you. If anything, extremely proud. And yet I know that there are environments that it is a competition and it is ego driven and it is all these things. And I think what I've chosen to do in this moment is to go, okay, let's just call it spade a spade. I'm alive. And I stayed alive, not only just through this experience, but a few others that could have been challenging and stopped me in my steps. Haven't. And I'm very grateful. And with that said, it's funny you said something earlier about, I don't know anybody who doesn't have something to unpack in my Louis Vuitton hard, cases in the corner. It's so funny you said that, Jill, because I was like, all of a sudden, I got this image of the Louis Vuitton trunk, this great trunk. And I was like, I always wanted that piece. And I was like, oh, interesting.
I got it.
I got it. And now we can say just a sweet little cross-strap bag. That is, it's so funny to me because, and this is, life is comedy, right? And you have to laugh at you. You have to be willing to laugh at yourself and experience, because otherwise it would be too much in most cases. But I was being interviewed.
Yeah, I don't know if it's nervous energy that causes a laugh sometimes in the hardest parts of the world. You know, like when you have a very difficult moment in life, or when I do, I tend to start laughing because of the absurdity of it, or the craziness of it. I remember having, so I went in to give birth to Ty, my youngest, and the girl gave me like a full push of Dilaudid, which is a street drug that is similar to heroin. And I'm 5'2" nothing, and she decided to give me a full. She said, "You look strong." I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I ended up throwing up for about 4 hours, every 20 minutes or less. I mean, after being hypertensive too, that was crazy. And they didn't know what to do with me, because until I could get an epidural and the baby wasn't traveled far enough down to, do that, I went from the NIC, like the triage area, in a chair, wheeling me up to another area that was more quiet, and then they put me on a bed, and then they took me off the bed and they put me in another chair, and they just tried, and I was running around with a bucket. At first it was just like a little bedpan thing, then it turned into like a whole like industrial tube, and like it was, I started cracking up. I'm like, there's nothing left in me. How do I even
It was your childhood with your father's boat that prepared you for these moments.
I had my own bucket then. I had my own bucket in triage. Like, it was perfect.
That point. It's interesting because getting back to like the unpacking the bag, or that kind of experience, and how you power through, it is all in your mind. And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everybody's mind is impervious to overcoming. No, but I'd like to think so. And I think that that's why mindfulness and rewiring one's brain is such an important healing tool, and where it all begins. It all begins with our mind and our attitude of how we're going to go forward. And you could have very easily been like, I'm out, or I can't do this, or I'm not capable. And instead, yeah, okay, your body was doing what it was doing, and you, like you said, went with the flow, as you do in your life. You have to, I always, and it's interesting because of camp, for instance, I've always had this image when it comes to flow, visualization, where it's like a stream where you can hear like the lapping of the water and the rustling of the leaves, and you can hear the birds singing, and you can just hear and smell the air. And like you even know that there's like a beaver building a dam, and there's just like all these blissful, balanced tundra experiences. To me, that is flow. And that's the application to just going through all things, no matter what one is faced with. That doesn't mean I don't have a knee-jerk reaction. It means I try to have a more in that moment, because there's plenty to like have your, moment of overwhelm. And yesterday in this interview, as things got more revealed unintentionally of the, I've had this experience, or I've had this experience. I mean, literally the interviewer was like, I think she was practically like, what the fuck? She was like, I think I don't know if she thought she was supposed to feel sorry for me. And that is just not who I am or where I come from. And this is what I said to her. I really believe that, I think this is what I said to her. I really believe that these are not experiences I've gone through as a victim. I've gone through these things so I can become a teacher to these moments, to show people how to be compassionate, how to be empathetic, how to hear another side of the story, how to know that a woman who is in a domestic violent environment, or a woman going through cancer, or a child coming up through a series of traumas, how this may apply. Yeah, it may sound a lot to you. To me, it's another day. And I'm not asking
The
for more.
road is bumpy, but I think people forget, you know? I
Yeah,
think
like,
people forget. I think they just kind of go on life's highway and they just don't pull it back. They don't unpack that bag for anything and they just keep going. And people who charge through in life and end up not feeling good about it, there's a lot of history. That's why therapists exist. And I'm telling you, you know, when I was 4, I think I went to the first therapy session.
mhm.
And I remember 5, I was in 6, I was in kindergarten. And I remember the therapist saying, you learn in poetry, right? You learn in rhymes. What if you were to write your feelings in poetry, in rhyme, right? It was a distraction from what was going on in my head to actually put it down on paper and write. This is
Yes.
the book. And this
Yeah.
book, I started writing when I was 6 until 30 poems.
I love that. Excuse my dipping, charging. That's
And
brilliant. And
the
is that
book that I'm unpacking all the stories from, I'm interweaving these poems.
Tune in next week for part 2 with my conversation with Jill as we continue to go down the lane of our whys. We are so passionate about the things that we are and our relationship and how it intertwines over these years. Where the spirit is young, the soul is wise, and the life stories are vast. We love sharing the Camp Fifi Uncensored podcast experience, the community. Subscribe, share, and come back next week to hear more. Much love. Have a great week. Bye for now.